Hey everyone, it's Ray and Sean with another podcast with Atlanta Braves Chop Live. Today we got a special guest, Wiley Ballard. Wiley, say hello to Braves Country.
Braves country, what's going on? Been a lot of fun this last month and a half or so.
I wanted to kind of start it off with, yesterday we put on the page, on the Facebook page, that we had the opportunity to interview you. So I just wanted to read a few of the comments, which, as you can imagine, they're probably a lot of them are the same. And this is just some of our top fans. Francis McLean, bring Wiley back. He was great at interviewing everyone. Cindy Jones O'Neill, bring Wiley back. Mitzi Malcolm, he fit in so well. We need him back. It just goes on and on. And, like you said, Braves country really enjoyed having you on the field. I think probably my favorite was just all the kind of the hijinks and, you know, doing the food experimenting and things like that. So, we really love you out here in Braves country.
I'm touched by that. I'm from Atlanta, born and raised, grew up a Braves fan. And so, I was telling you guys before we went on the air, that month of April is probably the coolest month I've had in my life. I'll say that. I was really grateful for the opportunity. And to also say, look, Hannah and Ashley, they're close friends of mine. I've known them for a while. They're doing a terrific job. And so, if there's a need, I'm happy to step in there. But look, as a Braves fan, independent of my career and where I'm trying to go with that, the past month was just such a thrill, and it'll be something I cherish the rest of my life. And if for Braves country to be, at least for those members of Braves country to be so positive, I can't tell you how much that means as somebody who grew up, watching the team and going to Turner Field and everything
Yeah.
like that.
Well, what's your first Braves memory, Wiley?
It's funny. I fell in love with baseball a little later, I think, than most baseball fans. My first distinct memories actually are probably the 2008 2009 season.
Mhm.
So I missed the run of division titles. But my most distinct memory, to be honest with you, like the first one I really remember is Charlie Morton's debut.
Yes.
I fell in love with scoring. That's actually kind of how I got turned on to baseball. It was the summer after my eighth grade year. I fell in love with scoring baseball. I tried it out. I said, "Oh my gosh!" It kind of opened my mind. I saw the game totally different. I really didn't have an appreciation for it before then. And so what I would do is, I would DVR the games when they're at the road or I couldn't go, and I would either, eat dinner and then go in there and fast forward through commercials and just keep score of every game. So I've got a couple of the score books, over in my apartment now. But Charlie Morton's debut was one of the very first games I did. So it's been really cool to see, just how that's all come full circle. Now he's back with the Braves. And, the other thing that happened that night, by the way, Brandon Jones hit his first career home run. I wrote that down on my scorebook.
Nice. I think my dad and I were at Charlie Morton's debut game in
Mhm.
Atlanta. And we obviously had no idea who he was. And we were like, Charlie Morton, Charlie Morton. And then he was traded to the Pirates after that.
Mhm.
So yeah, it was a bit of a connection there. Um, so you talked about scoring and statistics. Is that how you kind of started to create this passion for sports casting, or where did that start?
Well, it's funny. I actually, I'm from Atlanta, but I grew up a big ice hockey fan, Thrashers fan, really.
Oh yeah.
And so by the time I was probably first or second grade, my parents would say, I came to them and said, I want to be a sports announcer. So I had a pretty good pulse on wanting to do that from a very young age. I think I was always a performer, I guess. My mom would tell stories about, when I put on dance concerts for her. I was a huge NSYNC fan.
There
Not
you
as much
go.
anymore, but you can't be mad at Justin Timberlake. So I did a lot of dancing to NSYNC when I was really
Just
young.
give everybody a little bye bye bye. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, well, yeah. I'm a little out of practice, but yeah, no, bye, no strings attached. Yeah, absolutely. So I did a lot of that. I would do, I did some theater growing up as well, especially in middle school. Did a lot of that. But I was always just a huge sports fan as well. Whether it be college sports, I did grow up a Georgia Tech fan, went to school there. The Thrashers and I kind of got turned on to the Braves a little later on and baseball as a whole. And it didn't take long for baseball to become my favorite sport, bar none.
what do you think is the likelihood that ice hockey will ever make its way back into Atlanta?
Believe me, that was the question I was asking, I felt like on a daily basis, in those first few months after they announced they were leaving. I'll say this, and again, I don't know, I know what everybody else has read. I mean, but I will say that I feel like it is more of a possibility today than I would have said a year ago today, which is really exciting. Actually, I play in a men's ice hockey league here
Oh,
in the Atlanta area. We actually got a game coming up this afternoon. So shout out
oh, okay.
to Czech Republic and the Atlanta Amateur Hockey League.
Oh,
So
good
I'm
luck
really
with that.
crossing my
Good.
fingers. Yeah, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. If you see me with a black eye later on this year,
Yeah,
you know exactly
yeah.
what happened.
We're glad we got you on this appearance before that.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, the Nashville Predators. I mean, they're right up the road and they're wildly successful there. So
Yeah, I'd be the first one to tell you. I feel like, if so long as they win, and I think that's true for probably any professional team in Atlanta, right? I mean,
yeah.
college teams are a little less elastic, I guess. And I tell people that's because in this part of the country, my dad's from Atlanta and he was in high school when the pro teams got here. So as far as you talk about those generation ties, you can sit there and say, well, my grandfather had tickets, to Georgia football or Auburn football, Alabama football. None of the local people in Atlanta could say that about the Braves. That yeah,
Right.
my grandfather
Oh,
grew up going to
right.
Braves games, right? My dad did go to see some Crackers games when he was growing up, but it's a little different.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a while back. So, I was looking at your resume, and you've kind of done almost about everything. You give men and women's basketball, hockey, volleyball, soccer, college football, SEC network, ACC games, high school football. Um, where do you feel, of course, the Braves, but where do you feel like where's your niche as far as, if I were to eventually settle into a sport, or as a broadcaster, do you have a sport or a dream job that, besides like being with the Braves, which is like you said was the best month of your sportscasting life, but what's that kind of look like for you?
So I'll say this: I was told at a very young age in high school that two things. One, find a way to get on air as soon as you can. As so basically go somewhere where you can get reps. That was one, and then two, I was also told pretty much say yes to every opportunity you can. You're much more employable if you say I can do 10 different sports. As opposed to, well, I'm really just a baseball guy, or I'm just a basketball guy. I think that really opens the doors to a lot of different opportunities. And I think you look at the career paths of a lot of broadcasters, they've bounced around a good bit. I mean, the
Mhm.
guy I always kind of point to is Brian Anderson, who really got his start on the air as the sideline reporter for the San Antonio Spurs.
Mhm.
He did play-by-play for the Golf Channel. And now he's calling the national, or I guess TBS's playoff coverage for baseball. So he spent some time in some other sports, and I think my goal A has been say get on the air as often as possible, but also I mean the more games you work when you're coming out, that's more money in your pocket. So it's one of those where
Just
got to keep the lights on and rent and all that.
Yeah, that's always helpful. With all the different sports and types and teams that you're covering, tell us, what goes into the preparation for, and switching gears from one sport to another. Like, how much prep do you put in to do one game, one basketball game, one Braves game, one football game?
I'd say a lot, and I think I mean I'm sure Brandon and Ben would tell you the same thing. They've both done a bunch of different sports as well beyond baseball. I think that also tell you calling the same team 6 months out of the year makes things a lot easier,
Yeah.
as opposed to bouncing around. I mean, I go back to this past March. I was doing G League basketball, high school basketball state finals, college softball, college baseball for multiple different teams, and then I went down to spring training to fill in for Ben for a couple of days. So across about a 10-day stretch, I probably called about 15 to 17, 18 different teams across a variety of sports. So I think the biggest key, and again, what so many before me, or some of the guys I've asked, higher up on the totem pole, said you have to have a system to where you can be efficient and getting the information down on paper as you need it, learning it. I describe it. You're kind of studying for a final exam. Is kind of how I look at it. And the rule of thumb is, if you gather all your information, if you're using about 10 to 15% of it over the course of a game, that usually means you've got enough information. You hear marketing executives talk about, well, half your money in advertising is probably going to be spent, in waste. But the problem is you don't know which half, and
Right.
so for broadcasters, it's, oh, you only need 10 to 15% of your information. You just don't know which 10 to 15% it's going to be. For
Right.
instance, if you got a big story on Max Fried, and he gets knocked out in the second inning with a blister, well then boom, all that story and all that stuff he had cooked up for the next 4, 5, 6 innings, it's really no longer relevant. You kind of got to
Yeah.
move on and say, okay, Jesse Chavez, here we go. Or
Right.
Michael Tonkin last year. You've kind of got to be prepared for any possible, scenario. I mean, I think another good example is, I'm sure Ben and Brandon, they had notes on Zach Short. Probably didn't anticipate having to use him too much. And then boom, all of a sudden,
Yeah.
he's not only playing, but he's kind of the star of a couple games here this past week and a half or so. So much of it is about being prepared for any, possible scenario. And I do think the most valuable information I get, you can nowadays, especially in baseball, you can look up any statistic on
Right.
the internet. I mean, that's all available. But what most people can't do is go up and ask Austin Riley, hey, you tell me about, how you try and make this play at third base. Or if you ask, AJ Minter, tell me more about, how you've tried to modify your cutter, how are you throwing it differently than you did when you were, year one, year two, or something like that. So, I think that's really where the best stuff is it's something that you can't find in a computer, but you're actually engaging with the player, coach, or really, I mean, the term you might use in storytelling is character, because that's really what we're doing, is telling stories. And I think, I mean, again, to your point earlier with the hijinks, I think the more human, entertaining and relatable you can make it, the better products it's going to be for a live broadcast on television or radio.
Yeah. And I think
Last person we interviewed was Ben Ingram. And I was kind of amazed. He said at the age of about 9 to 11, about 11 is when he started doing his own little voiceovers or broadcasts and looking for particular people that he loved to listen to on the radio. He interviewed the Braves organist. He talked about from a young kid, he just grew up playing music and, loved the environment of being able to, hear the organ in the ballpark. At what point did you say, like, I'm going to make this a career? And also, how was it getting that first call about, hey, you're going to be on the Braves broadcast?
So first, wanting to do it as a career, I mean, like I said, I think from about 7 or 8, I knew I wanted to be a play-by-play commentator. I think the people I first think of, and again, like I said, I kind of fell in with baseball a little later, but I think of JP Dellacamera, who was the voice of the Thrashers when I was growing up. He's much actually more widely known as the voice of women's soccer, the Olympics and Team USA, but he was the voice of the Thrashers. I think of Wes Durham, who's the voice of the Falcons now, ACC Network. He was the voice of Georgia Tech when I was growing up. Those are the two names. And then, when I first got really into baseball, heck, I'd argue one of the reasons I like baseball so much is because, I really enjoyed John Shambi and Joe Simpson working together. And then later on, Chip and Joe. And so, I mean, those are kind of the guys I think of as inspiring me to get involved with it. I'd also say, Jim Powell as well. Listened to him on the radio growing up. And, it's funny with Ben, it was really cool. I remember meeting him when I was a freshman in high school. I was working in the Braves press box as kind of a press box attendant. I was the cashier, if you will, for the press box. The way I would describe it is if Mark Bowman or Dave O'Brien or Chip Carey wanted to get a hot dog or some type of meal before they did their work, I was the guy they'd come and, pay $5 or $10 to. And that was an opportunity that I came across because I was at Georgia Tech working in sports information. One of the Braves official scorers, the one who decides if it's a hit or an error, he works at Georgia Tech. Name's Mike Stamus. He's the basketball PR guy for Georgia Tech. And so the Braves reached out to him and said, hey, do you know any students who might be interested? He said, why do you want to do it? I said, I jumped on it. And to me, it was the first opportunity I had, after the fourth or fifth time that Chip came up or Jim came up or Joe or Don or Mark, Dave, they kind of, after I'd been there for, 4 or 5 times, they'd start to be like, well, so what's your story? I mean, what are you doing? At that point, it kind of gives me an opportunity to say, hey, I'm in college, my dream is to be a baseball announcer. And, I'd love to hear about how you got to where you are. and the industry. And I also got to meet a lot of visiting broadcasters as well. But circling back to the second half of your question, I'll never forget it. Obviously, I worked with Bally the last 4 years, actually, working as a graphics producer, talent stats. I know in 2020 was my first year, and I'd sit next to Chip and Frenchie, and we'd be in the broadcast booth. There'd be nobody in the entire stadium. We were watching the games. It was really cool. We get to be one of the few people who got to watch those games live in 2020. But anyway, so I had some relationships at Bally, and I was skiing, actually. I was on a trip in California. Got a bunch of friends from college who live out in San Francisco. And so we'd gone to Lake Tahoe. It was our last day on the mountain, and it's probably about, I don't know, 10 or 11 a.m. in the morning out there on the West Coast. And I got a phone call, and I said, "Oh my gosh, this guy works for Bally. This is kind of peculiar. I'm curious what he's calling about, but I better take it." So I just gotten off the chairlift, actually, and I spoke with him, and he said, "Hey, we got this opening these first, 4 to 5 weeks where we need a sideline reporter, and we'd like, to give you the opportunity." And I had one buddy who was with me, and I had it on speakerphone because my helmet, I didn't take off my helmet to get the phone in my ear. And my buddy just looks at me and goes, and so obviously it didn't take long. He said, "Yes, I'm all over it. I'll be there. And thanks for the opportunity," and hung up. And then, I had the greatest ski run of my life going down there.
I bet you did.
So it was pretty surreal.
Yeah, Ben Ingram, we interviewed him as well, and he also told us a similar story about the preparation, using basically like about 10%, and especially for him, and it's an entire season, but really, like you said, though, getting the opportunity, taking advantage of the opportunity, and really putting yourself out there, not just doing a job. Like, you could have just shown up, done the cashier's job, taken the money and given the change, not said anything to anybody, and it could have been a different story for you.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say, I think in all walks of life, regardless of what you're doing, if you're in high school or college, or looking to make a change, later on in your professional life, I think the first step is sort of expressing that to other people. And who knows who they might know, or they might, be able to give you some insight, or, heck, maybe they've got somebody in the industry that you didn't even know they knew, but because you said that, they think of it and, kind of share that with you. And, that's one. And then two, I think you just learn a lot. Ben was a huge resource for me. And the other funny thing is, I met Brandon Gaudin when I was a freshman, or I guess a sophomore in college, because he got hired at Georgia Tech. And so I was at Georgia Tech. He was there. We started talking. So I think that's one of the reasons I was able to step in so comfortably that first month, is because I know Brandon for over 10 years. That's just, one of my, good friends, mentors, however you want to say it. So, I felt like I was stepping into a role where everybody, whether it was the guy on the other side of the camera, or, our producer, or Brandon on the air, like, I knew all these people. So it didn't feel as daunting as it might have been if that opportunity had come up somewhere else where I didn't know anybody. So I think that was one of the things I was most grateful for, is, I knew our entire crew, both on and off the air, for working with the Braves telecast the last 4 seasons. I think that was a massive advantage for me as far as nerves and everything else.
Yeah, definitely. We could tell the rapport you have with everybody. I think that just made it easier for everybody to really enjoy your commentary. But tell us, who, if it was a player or a coach or just any personnel, that when you met them, you were starstruck by this person, and what was that story?
For me, I think Charlie was a big one. Like I said, because he'd been around long enough, and again, one of the first Braves games I scored was his major league debut against the Angels. So that was kind of full circle. The other one, Eddie Perez, just because I've been a Braves fan for so long, I've been seeing that guy forever. And I would also throw in there Snicker, really. Snit as a guy, again, when I was falling in love with Braves baseball, he was coaching third, and we all saw the 4-man booth this past week. He was, giving McCann stop signs, and I remember watching, that McCann triple, just cratered, and I remember seeing it. They would bring that back. It felt like almost once a month throughout his time in Atlanta. They show, "Hey, remember that time McCann hit a triple?" And so getting to meet Frenchie as well. That obviously I've known him now for a handful of years, but I remember when he came back, I was working in the press box as a statistician for MLB.com. And he kind of gave me, "Hey man, what's up?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh, that's Jeff Francoeur." So yeah, I think the more I've been around, it's probably less starstruck. But again, for all that time I, had been working with Bally, these previous 4 seasons, I didn't spend a whole lot of time around the players. I knew obviously the broadcasters well. I knew, a few of the members of the coaching staff, but I really just, in my role, there wasn't really a need for me to go in there during open clubhouse or during BP. And honestly, there was other things I had to be taken care of for the show. So yeah, those would be the guys I'd kind of put up there. Snit, Eddie, Charlie, those would be kind of the big ones.
Well, tell us why. Oh, go ahead, Sean.
I saw the other day somebody had a T-shirt that said Wiley Milkshake Mafia. Have you seen any of those out there?
I saw the one out there in Seattle.
Yeah, Seattle.
Yeah, that was, which is of all the places for it to be. Yeah, that kind of caught me off guard, but hey, you can put anything on a T-shirt nowadays, easier than ever.
Yeah.
And I told him, I got to buy him a beer or something. I owe him, because that that obviously makes me look good, or at least look goofy. But that was also, CJ said at the time, that was kind of a welcome to the big leagues moment for me, where all of a sudden, there's a T-shirt with my face on out there. In the stadium. Obviously, that's not the reason I got into it. I tell people all the time, like, I just love baseball. I'm going to Charlotte for the ACC baseball tournament tomorrow. I'm psyched about that. I'll keep tabs on the high school playoffs here in Georgia. I'm from Georgia. So I just, any level, if there's a chance to go to a baseball game, I'm there. I really enjoy the sport. And I think, like anything, the more you know about it, the more you learn, the more fascinated you might be by something.
Well, Sean,
oh, go ahead, Roy.
I was just going to say, Sean and I are both from Columbus, Georgia. And as you know, the Mississippi Braves are moving here next year. So we're going to probably need you to do some play-by-play down here at Golden Park.
Hey, sign me up. It's funny. Actually, I've been to an M Braves game. Went to a couple of them when I was in college. The play-by-play voice of the Mississippi Braves was a guy named Kyle Tate for a long time. He'd gone to Georgia Tech, and truthfully, the reason I went to Georgia Tech is because Kyle, at the time, I was probably a freshman or sophomore in high school, and I heard he was the announcer, and I asked him, "So are you a student at Georgia Tech announcing the baseball games?" He said, "Yes." And I was like, "Well, how hard did you, have to work to get that opportunity? How many other people applied?" And he kind of looked at me and said, "They were desperate. Nobody else wanted to do it." And I was like, "Are you serious?" And at the time, Georgia Tech was like a top 15 team. And so when I was making my college decision, there was one option where, okay, I could go to, say the University of Maryland, terrific broadcast journalism program. There are a bunch of big names that have come out of there, Syracuse and Northwestern in the same breath, but Maryland was kind of where I was looking. And so it kind of came down to Maryland or Georgia Tech. In Georgia Tech, I was going to major in something that wasn't journalism. I wound up majoring in finance. But the advice I got, kind of what I said earlier, I knew I was going to get a chance to get on the air. There weren't going to be a lot of people who wanted to get into what I was doing. And then you throw in the fact that it's in Atlanta, which is, a top 10 market. There's a lot of other events going on around the city. Again, a perfect example, the Braves are here, and, somebody who works at Georgia Tech Sports Information shares, "Hey, the Braves are looking for somebody to help out in their press box." If I'm at another school, even if it's Maryland near the Orioles or the Terrapins, or Northwestern near the Cubs or the White Sox, there's probably like 5, 6, 7 seniors who are getting that opportunity before I am. Whereas I was the only student in the sports information office, or one of a handful. And they said, "Hey, why do you want to do it?" And boom, there I was. So it's interesting. It was, for me, as I look back on it, it was kind of an opportunity where, a lot of people were zigging. And so I decided to zag, if that makes sense. And I think, regardless of where it ended up with the Braves and doing sideline, I think just doing those, 4.5 years of college baseball at Georgia Tech, and that's a role I'm still in. Some of the most cherished moments, of my life so far, and got me a chance to, call, over 300 games by the time I graduated.
Wow. Yeah, that's fantastic.
Well, so you were 1 month with Bally, and then you've been with Georgia Tech, and everybody's like, "Where is Wiley?" And So we posted some pictures of you, and people started, the different hashtags. We actually have an online store where we sell T-shirts and stuff. So we might have to do a "Where's Wiley" T-shirt. And
Yeah.
but you was recently with O'Brien, the catcher, and at Georgia Tech, right? And
I know I was working with Greg Olson.
yeah, Greg Olson. I'm sorry, Greg Olson.
So it's funny. It's actually not that Greg Olson. It's the other Greg Olson. He went to Auburn. He was a pitcher, so the reliever. I was working with Greg over. We were doing Auburn, Alabama this past week.
Oh wow! I also got Greg Olson. Oh, he's doing different Greg Olson.
Different Greg Olson. Yeah, they've dealt with that their whole lives. Greg I know gets a big kick out of it.
Yeah. So is it, people are always asking, "Where's Wiley? Is he ever going to come back?" Do you have any future plans of covering any MLB games, or do you have any future in reference to that, or to the Braves or whatever?
Yeah, I can tell you right now, I will be back at some point this season in the sideline reporting role for Bally. I think that's all I can say right now. And I'm also get a chance every once in a while to pinch hit for either Kevin McAlpin or Chris Domino there on the pregame show or the postgame show. Of course, I filled in on Kevin for postgame already once this year, and it ended up being the game where AJ gave up the walk-off home run to Brandon Nimmo. So I told Kevin, hey, man, you can't just give me the ones where you lose in dramatic fashion. But Kev, yeah, so my guess it will be, over the course of the summer, I'm sure I'll have a chance to, fill in on some pregame, some postgame shows for Kevin when he, as either has to take the night off to go see Max, who's, his, I guess, 10-year-old son now, I think. Playing summer baseball or some other event. I'm kind of the guy, the first guy on standby if he or Domino have to miss the pregame show.
Well, Wiley, until then, we're glad to hear that news that you'll have an opportunity to come back. But until then, we'll have to play this on loop on our page until that date.
Yes, and hey, if you make those T-shirts, let me know, and I'll get a Where's Waldo outfit going for you. And
if you do that and take a photo, I'm sure those would go really well.
Oh yeah.
Well, Wiley, thank you again for joining us, giving us the opportunity to chat with you and the opportunity for Braves Country to kind of catch up with you a bit. And we're really happy with all the Braves Valley Sports staff, and we really enjoyed you earlier this year and look forward to having you back.
Guys, anytime. I can't tell you how much, I appreciate you guys giving me a chance to sit down, catch up with you. And, I was telling you before we went on the air, my mom is the biggest Atlanta Braves Chop Live fan on Facebook there is. She is checking it, all the time. So it's, really appreciate the work you guys do. I think it's one of the best places, social media, to catch up and figure out what's going on with the team. And, sometimes I'll get some information for you guys as well. So
awesome. That's great. All right. Well, take care, Wiley. We'll talk to you again soon.
Yeah.
Sounds good. See y'all soon.
All right. Take care.